What if I told you that nature has been conducting its own experiments right under our noses, creating life forms that shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about biology? What if decades of human activity had accidentally triggered evolutionary changes so radical that they've produced creatures that exist in a biological gray area between aquatic and terrestrial life? The story I'm about to share with you will make you question everything you think you know about adaptation, evolution, and the incredible resilience of life on Earth. Meet Jimmy Boudreaux, a 43-year-old commercial fisherman who spent his entire life working the waters around Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Jimmy comes from a long line of Mississippi River fishermen. His grandfather worked these same waters during the Great Depression, and his father built the small fishing operation that Jimmy now runs. Jimmy knows every bend, every sandbar, every deep hole in a 50-mile stretch of the Mississippi River better than he knows the roads in his own neighborhood. It was a humid Tuesday morning in late June when Jimmy was checking his catfish lines about 12 miles south of Baton Rouge, near the small town of Plaquemine. The river was running high from spring rains, carrying more debris than usual: fallen trees, trash, the occasional unfortunate farm animal. Jimmy had just pulled in a decent-sized blue catfish when he heard something that made him stop and listen carefully. Over the sound of the river current and the drone of his boat engine, Jimmy could hear what sounded like distressed chirping or squeaking. It was rhythmic, urgent, like an animal calling for help. Following the sound, Jimmy spotted something struggling in a tangle of fishing line and plastic debris that had gotten caught in some overhanging cypress branches near the riverbank. At first glance, Jimmy thought it might be a young otter, or maybe a muskrat that had gotten tangled up in discarded fishing gear. But as he maneuvered his boat closer, he realized this was unlike any river animal he'd ever seen. The creature was about the size of a small dog, maybe 20 pounds, but its proportions were all wrong for any mammal native to Louisiana waters. The animal had sleek, dark fur that seemed to shimmer with an almost metallic sheen in the morning sunlight. Its body was elongated like an otter's, but the limbs were more developed, with what looked like webbed hands rather than typical paws. The head was broad and flat, with large, intelligent eyes that tracked Jimmy's movements with startling awareness. But the most unusual feature was visible when the creature opened its mouth. Alongside normal mammalian teeth, Jimmy could see what looked like gill slits along the sides of its neck. Jimmy carefully untangled the creature from the fishing line, noting that it didn't struggle or try to bite despite obviously being frightened and in pain. One of its hind limbs appeared to be injured, and there were several cuts from where the fishing line had wrapped tightly around its body. But what struck Jimmy most was the way the animal looked at him. Not with the wild panic you'd expect from a trapped river creature, but with what seemed like recognition and gratitude. The nearest veterinary clinic that treated wildlife was Dr. Patricia Williams's practice in Baton Rouge. Dr. Williams has been treating both domestic animals and Louisiana wildlife for over 20 years, and she's seen just about everything the Mississippi River ecosystem can produce: alligators, nutria, river otters, every species of turtle native to the region. When Jimmy arrived at her clinic with his mysterious river rescue, Dr. Williams thought she was prepared for anything. She wasn't prepared for this. The moment Dr. Williams examined the creature, she knew she was looking at something that didn't fit into any category of North American wildlife she'd studied. The bone structure was mammalian, but with adaptations she'd never seen before. The skull was broader than an otter's, suggesting a larger brain cavity. The limbs showed both terrestrial and aquatic adaptations: powerful muscles for swimming, but also the bone density and joint structure needed for sustained land locomotion. But the real shock came when Dr. Williams noticed that the creature was breathing through both its nose and what appeared to be functional gill slits. She'd never seen a mammal with working gills before. It shouldn't be biologically possible. Mammals and fish represent completely different evolutionary branches that diverged hundreds of millions of years ago. Yet here was an animal that seemed to combine characteristics from both groups. The initial examination revealed that the injured limb wasn't broken, just badly bruised and cut from the fishing line. Dr. Williams cleaned and treated the wounds, which the creature tolerated remarkably well, almost like it understood that the treatment was helping rather than harming it. She also took blood samples and tissue samples for analysis, though she had no idea what the results might reveal. While they waited for the lab results, Jimmy agreed to temporarily care for the creature at his home near the river. He set up a large enclosure that included both a water area and dry land, not knowing which environment the animal would prefer. Dr. Williams provided antibiotics and pain medication and scheduled daily checkups to monitor the creature's recovery. That's when Jimmy started noticing behaviors that defied explanation. The creature, which Jimmy had started calling River because of where he'd found it, seemed equally comfortable in water and on land. But more than that, it appeared to be actively switching between breathing air and breathing water depending on its environment. When River was swimming, Jimmy could see water flowing through those gill slits. When it was on land, the gills would close and it would breathe normally through its nose. Dr. Williams had never seen anything like it. She consulted with colleagues at LSU's Veterinary School, sent photos to marine biologists who studied unusual aquatic mammals, even reached out to evolutionary biologists who specialized in transitional species. Nobody had any explanation for what they were seeing. The lab results came back 2 weeks later, and they raised more questions than they answered. River's DNA contained genetic markers from several different mammalian families, but also sequences that didn't match anything in the genetic databases. Most puzzling were genetic elements that seemed similar to those found in certain fish species, particularly those known for their ability to survive in both fresh and salt water. Dr. Williams contacted Dr. C. Robert Chen, a geneticist and environmental biologist at Tulane University who specializes in studying how pollution affects genetic expression in wildlife. When Dr. Chen saw River's genetic analysis and observed the creature's impossible physiology, he immediately suspected they were looking at something unprecedented, a mammalian species that had undergone rapid evolutionary adaptation in response to environmental pressures. Dr. Chen's examination of River was even more thorough than Dr. Williams's had been. Using advanced imaging equipment, he discovered that River's internal anatomy was as unusual as its external features. The creature had both mammalian lungs and a modified gill system that allowed it to extract oxygen from water. Its digestive system showed adaptations for processing both aquatic and terrestrial food sources. Most remarkably, its nervous system included structures that resembled the echolocation organs found in dolphins and whales. To test this theory, Dr. Chen conducted a series of behavioral experiments with River. In a controlled aquatic environment, he documented that River could indeed use echolocation to navigate and locate objects underwater. The creature produced a series of clicks and chirps, then appeared to interpret the returning sound waves to build a mental map of its surroundings. This was a capability that had never been observed in any land mammal. But Dr. Chen needed to understand where River had come from and how such radical adaptations could have occurred. He convinced Jimmy to take him back to the exact location where River had been found, bringing along equipment to test water quality, sediment composition, and environmental factors that might explain these extraordinary evolutionary changes. The investigation revealed the source of River's impossible biology, and it was more disturbing than anyone had expected. The stretch of the Mississippi River where Jimmy had found River sits downstream from multiple industrial sites that have been operating since the 1940s. Chemical plants, petroleum refineries, and manufacturing facilities had been releasing various pollutants into the river for decades, many of which weren't regulated or well understood when the discharge began. Water and sediment analysis revealed high concentrations of various industrial chemicals, including several compounds known to affect genetic expression and cellular development. Dr. Chen's theory was that a population of river otters or similar aquatic mammals had been exposed to these chemical pollutants over multiple generations, causing accelerated genetic mutations that produced River's species. But unlike typical pollution-related genetic damage, which usually results in harmful mutations and reduced survival rates, this particular combination of chemicals seemed to have triggered beneficial adaptations. The pollutants had somehow activated dormant genetic sequences related to aquatic breathing and echolocation, capabilities that River's ancestors had lost millions of years ago during their evolutionary transition from water to land. Dr. Chen published his preliminary findings in Environmental Science and Technology, and the response from the scientific community was explosive. Here was evidence that environmental pollution could sometimes drive rapid evolutionary adaptation rather than just causing genetic damage. River represented a real-time example of evolution in action, compressed from millions of years into just a few decades. The discovery attracted attention from researchers around the world, but it also brought unwanted scrutiny from environmental regulators and industrial companies. The chemical plants upstream from River's habitat suddenly found themselves under investigation for their historical discharge practices. Environmental groups seized on River as proof that industrial pollution was causing unpredictable changes to wildlife. Meanwhile, River continued to thrive in Jimmy's care, growing larger and demonstrating increasingly sophisticated behaviors. The creature learned to respond to its name, could solve simple puzzles, and showed remarkable problem-solving abilities both in water and on land. Most remarkably, River seemed to have some kind of intuitive understanding of water quality. It would refuse to enter water that contained high levels of pollutants, even when those contamination levels were too low for humans to detect. Dr. Chen's team discovered that River wasn't alone. Using underwater cameras and acoustic monitoring equipment, they documented at least 8 other individuals of the same species living in the Mississippi River system between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. The creatures appeared to live in family groups and used complex vocalizations to communicate across large distances underwater. But the most extraordinary discovery came when Dr. Chen's team began studying River's effect on its environment. Wherever River spent time in the water, pollution levels began to decrease. The creature seemed to be actively filtering toxins from the water through some biological process that the researchers didn't fully understand. Water samples taken from areas where River had been swimming showed significantly reduced concentrations of industrial chemicals and heavy metals. Further investigation revealed that River's species had evolved not just to survive in polluted water, but to actually clean it. Their modified digestive and respiratory systems could process certain industrial toxins and convert them into harmless compounds. They had become living water filtration systems, biological machines that could reverse some of the environmental damage that had created them in the first place. The implications were staggering. Here was a species that had evolved in response to human environmental damage and then developed the ability to repair that damage. River and its relatives represented a form of biological remediation that could potentially clean up polluted waterways more effectively than any human technology. Environmental agencies began studying the possibility of using River's species as a natural solution to water pollution problems. Chemical companies found themselves in the bizarre position of having accidentally created creatures that could undo decades of environmental damage. The legal and ethical implications were mind-boggling. Who owns a species that evolved as a direct result of industrial pollution?
Jimmy became the center of an international debate about environmental responsibility, evolutionary ethics, and the rights of artificially evolved species. River, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the controversy it had sparked. It continued to divide its time between swimming in Jimmy's pond and exploring the nearby riverbank, occasionally producing those mysterious clicking sounds that reminded everyone that this creature represented something entirely new in the history of life on Earth. Dr.
Chen's ongoing research has revealed even more remarkable capabilities. River's species appears to have a form of chemical communication that allows them to share information about water conditions across large distances. When one individual encounters a new type of pollutant, it can somehow communicate the chemical signature to other members of its species, who then develop resistance to that toxin within weeks rather than generations. The creatures have also developed a symbiotic relationship with certain fish species, using their echolocation abilities to guide schools of fish away from polluted areas and toward cleaner water. They've become ecosystem engineers, actively managing the health of their aquatic environment in ways that benefit multiple species. The story of River has changed how we think about evolution, pollution, and the relationship between human activity and natural systems. It's proof that life doesn't just adapt to environmental challenges. Sometimes it evolves solutions that are more elegant and effective than anything humans could design. River now serves as an ambassador for its species, helping researchers understand how rapid evolutionary adaptation works and how we might harness these natural processes to address environmental problems. The creature that Jimmy rescued from a tangle of fishing line has become a symbol of hope that nature can find ways to heal the damage we've caused, sometimes in ways we never expected. But River's story also raises profound questions about our responsibility for the evolutionary changes we've triggered. If industrial pollution can create new species with beneficial adaptations, what does that mean for how we manage environmental policy? Are we obligated to protect species that evolved as a direct result of human activity? And what other evolutionary experiments might be happening in polluted environments around the world? The research continues, with new discoveries being made regularly about River's species and their remarkable capabilities. They represent a new category of life, not quite natural, not quite artificial, but something in between that challenges our understanding of evolution, environmental science, and the resilience of life itself. Jimmy still takes River out on the Mississippi River several times a week, watching as the creature dives and surfaces with obvious joy, its gill slits fluttering as it extracts oxygen from the muddy water that has been both its curse and its salvation. It's a reminder that nature is far more adaptable and creative than we ever imagined, and that sometimes our mistakes can lead to developments that are more wonderful than anything we could have planned. So the next time you're near a river or lake, especially one that's been affected by human activity, pay attention to the wildlife around you. You might be witnessing the next chapter in evolution, where environmental challenges become evolutionary opportunities, and where life finds ways to turn pollution into possibility. If this incredible story of evolution and environmental adaptation fascinated you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more amazing discoveries about how life adapts and thrives in our changing world. And tell me in the comments, do you think we have a responsibility to protect species that evolved because of human environmental impact, even if those changes were accidental?